Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to part 4 of our 4-part miniseries. We are almost done with this miniseries, and I'm kind of sad and excited, but to be ready to be moving on to the next case. It's been so busy enough. But if you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe. Help a girl out. Well, with that being said, why don't I dive into the last part of our miniseries, shall we? Um, So, let's talk about the charges now. On July 2nd, 2020, prosecutors will drop two charges against Lori related to desertion and non-support of dependent children, but they instead charged her with obstruction or concealment of evidence in a children's home. And on July 17, in light of two felony counts against Lori have been dropped, her bond was lowered in Madison County to $50,000 for each charge, totaling about $150,000. It was known that Chad would still need to post $1 million in Fremont County. And on May 25th, 2021, Chad and Lori were indicted on charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for the deaths of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, as well as a grand theft by deception regarding the children. Lori was also charged with grand theft related to her children's Social Security survivors benefits. Now, Chad faced an insurance fraud charge related to Tammy's life insurance policy. And in June 2021, Lori was indicted by a grand jury in Maricopa County, Arizona, on one count of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for the deaths of Charles Vallow. In the police documents we read that the evidence showed that Charles's death was a planned event and necessary to prevent Charles and others from confronting Lori about her extreme religious beliefs when he came to town. The death of Charles Vallow was also necessary in order for Chad and Lori to marry to fulfill their religious prophecy. And in July 2021, prosecutors of Maricopa County decided not to prosecute Chad in connection with the death of Charles Vallow, citing no reasonable likelihood of conviction. Now, in September 2021, Chad's children issued a statement defending their father's innocence and claiming that he had been fooled in the worst way, of the most deadly way possible, by Lori. Now, in 2022, Lori was indicted by a grand jury on one count of first-degree premeditated murder related to the crimes that she conspired with her brother to kill Brandon. Now, prosecutors believe that Lori helped to access Brandon's money through her niece. Now, let's talk about the trials, shall we? Because I know that's why y'all really came on here, right? First, we have to be in Idaho. So, a jury for the Madison County charges against Lori was initially set for January 25th, 2021. But on May 27, 2021, Lori was found incompetent and unfit to stand trial, and her case was stayed. And on April 11, 2002, she was deemed competent to stand trial after mental health treatment. And on October 6, 2022, after her attorney filed several motions, the judge issued an order indicating that the case was suspended until a competency stand trial and could be determined. And on November 16th, she was found competent. Now, Lori and Chad are both pled not guilty to charges in Idaho, and their case was split in March 2023 at Chad's request. Now, the reasons were Chad had waived his right to a speedy trial and that his attorneys needed more time to review DNA evidence. And Chad's attorneys also cited the mutually antagonistic nature of the defendant's position, since Lori had not waived her right to a swift trial, and that the court ruled that her case would proceed as planned. Now let's talk about Lori now. On March 21st, 2023, the judge removed the death penalty from Lori Vallow-Daybell due to a newly uncovered DNA evidence discovered too close to the trial to be tested and admitted in the account. Now, Lori Vallow-Daybell's trial will begin on April 3rd, 2023 in Boise, and she did not testify to her own defense, which you have that right to do. Again, I'm going to clarify that. You have a right to not testify. Now, in some cases, it could work against you, it could not work against you. And I happen to believe that if you go back and watch my Jason Crawford episode, I believe that his testimony made it to where he was found really played a role that if he had not testified, he could have almost gotten away with it. I truly believe that. But back to this case, right? Because this is why you actually clicked on it. Now, his lawyers did not call any witnesses while the prosecution called about 60 people to testify. In light of the evidence that pointed at Alex's direct involvement with the unaliving, prosecutors said that Lori had groomed and manipulated her brother to participate in the crimes. Lori's sister Summer testified that Alex had suffered brain damage in the car accident and that his decision making was stuck in teenage level. Now, Zalima said that Alex was entirely under the influence of Chad and Lori, who had convinced him that he was reincarnated warrior of God, and that the only reason he had come to Earth was to protect Lori. Now, in the closing arguments, Lori's attorney, Jim Archibald, depicted her as being under Vallow-Daybell's psychological control. And on May 12, 2023, Lori was found guilty on all criminal charges. On July 31st, 2023, she was sentenced to consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for respectively the murder of Tylee JJ and the conspiracy to commit murder and all that. The murder of Tylee, the murder of JJ, and the conspiracy to commit murder charges against Tammy. In addition, she was found five restitution and grand theft charges. Now, Judge Boyd said that Vallow had murdered her children to remove them as obstacles to profit financially by choosing the most evil and destructive path possible and going down a bizarre and religious rabbit hole. Now, before her sentencing, Lori made her first public statement since the arrest, saying that she had been speaking to Jesus and unwell for her children that Tammy, Tylee, JJ, and Tammy's were happy and extremely busy in heaven. She also stated that Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen, suicides happen, fatal side effects from medication happen. Yeah, this woman's wacko. Now, let's talk about Chad now. On November 9th, 2023, Chad's legal team filed 3 motions to remove the death penalty in his murder trial, and the final motion stated that Lori had been manipulated and Chad throughout the emotional and sexual control and later culpability with his defendants, and who did not face the death penalty, and their motions were also denied in church in December. Now, Chad's trial opened April 10th, 2024. In his opening statement, Prosecutor Wab Wood depicted as the man involved was motivated by sex, money, and power, and craving significance, who saw his spouse and Lori's children as the obstacle for his rightful destiny. Now, Chad's attorney painted him as a religious man who had been lured into an inappropriate relationship by Lori. And his statement also focused on Alex's history and violence and role in Lori's protector. Now, on May 16th, Chad's defense team filed a motion for acquittal and it appeared to be amended in the indictment of incorrectly listed J.J. Vallow's death having been between September 8th or 9th of 2019 instead of September 23rd of 2030. George Voice ruled that it was a clerical error and was not ground for acquittal. Now, 2 of Chad's children, Emmer and Garth, would testify that their dad said that their mom had been experiencing bad health problems and was getting extremely tired easily. Now, on the contrary, 3 former colleagues of Tammy said that she was seemed healthy and energetic, and on the day before her death, her sister also testified that Tammy had seen fine when she visited them on October 14, 2019. Now, Chad did not take the stand. Again, you have that right to. During closing arguments, and prosecutors Lindsay summarized the evidence that pointed to Chad's recurring crucial role as coordinating and giving a religious justification, and prior painted Lori and Alex to be the true culprits, stating that Lori had been motivated by greed and that she had manipulated Chad, along with him, would be her next victim. Could he have been her next victim? We may never know. They were both cuckoo and crazy enough. So maybe once they're you don't know. Like maybe when one of them started coming out of the cloud in the haze, yeah, maybe. Will that happen? Highly unlikely. But anyway, on May 30th, 2024, the jury found Chad Daybell guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy and death of Tammy, Tylee, and JJ. He also was found guilty of grand theft by deception related to the children's killings and an insurance fraud related to Tammy's. Now, the Woodcocks expressed dissatisfaction in the verdict, and Larry commented about Chad and Lori's crimes. What they did accomplish, nothing. What did they do? They destroyed families. It was confirmed that the prosecution would seek the death penalty for Chad. After his sentence hearing, Chad chose not to present any mitigation evidence, and on June 1st, 2024, he was sentenced to death for insurance fraud charges, and he was also sentenced to 15 years in prison to run concurrent, and the restitution of $130,000 plus $300,000. Now, since Chad had been deemed indigent, no fines were added to the insurance fraud sentence. Now, Tammy's extended family, Matt and Heather Daybell, as well as the Boudreaux, Cox, and the Shiflett families, also issued statements regarding their belief at the end of the trial that their victims and praising the work of law enforcement and the judge and the jurors. Okay. Now, let's talk about Arizona. Go to Arizona now, because we can't not in this case without talking about this. In November 2023, Lori was extradited to Arizona to face 2 conspiracy charges there. She pled not guilty to both, and in February 2024, her trial was scheduled to begin, and on August 1st the same year. Though the judge mentioned that it might be moved at a later date due to the amount of evidence to process. In June, her defense team in Arizona filed a motion requesting delay in trial, and she objected and continued to assert her right to a speedy trial. On July 2nd, the lawyer's request was granted for a trial date. It was moved to February 24th, 2025. Now, on October 2024, Lori's attorneys made a request for a competency hearing, and 1 week later, Lori requested to waive her rights to counsel and act as her own lawyer. Yeah, because that works out so well. Look at Bundy, for example. At a December 5th, 2024 hearing, Lori was deemed by a doctor to be mentally fit and competent to stand trial, and that the judge granted Lori's request to represent herself. And Lori said that she had a hearing and revealed real trial experience and all that. Now, the court decided that Charles Vallow case and the Van Boudreaux case would be tried separately, and the judge will begin a trial date for the Charles Vallow conspiracy case, March 31st, 2025. Scheduling for Lori's trial on the Brendan Boudreaux attempted will take place at the conclusion of the first trial. Now, how's this missing in depiction? Well, Lifetime also released a movie about this as well. But in 2020, Investigation Discovery released a 3-episode documentary and concealed this and everything. Now, in 2021, Lifetime depicted a movie called released a dramatization of this and everything as well. But yeah. That is it for this mini-series. Join me next time as we talk about the Laken Riley case and how her case divided a whole country when it should have brought a whole country together.